Hi, welcome back to the Witchy Web We Weave. I'm Alara.
I'm Alex.
And this is going to be episode 2 of our Tarot Tuesday. This particular video is going to be all about the Fool's Journey, which is going to be the major introduction to the major arcana, or the majors. These are the major events in the tarot. So we're talking about cards that whenever you see them, it's pertaining to very large events, like overarching events within a person's life. We're talking about sometimes cosmic lessons and things like that. So whenever you see a major, it's a big deal, a lot more so than just seeing a minor card, which a lot of minors will reflect some of the different things going on in the majors. It just won't be to the biggest degree. So let's get started and we'll see how we go, okay? So like I said, the Fool's Journey is all about, you guessed it, it's the journey of the Fool through the major arcana. Now this is a technique, I'm going to put him down for a minute. This is a technique that people have come up with to help learn the major arcana in a way that can kind of make sense to people rather than just trying to memorize the 22 major arcanas they try and tell in the version of a story, so that it helps you kind of process. Yeah, there might be some memorization that needs to take place after that, but it helps you get some of the basics down and get an overarching concept. So when we're talking about the Fool's Journey, there are a bunch of different ways that people have done this. And so I'm going to just kind of go over some of the different options that I've seen how people have done some of the Fool's Journey, and then I'll kind of talk about the way that I'm going to do it, and then we'll go from there. So the way that the Fool's Journey has been laid out before that I've seen is they would lay out all 22 cards with the Fool off to the side, and then they would just have like basically 3 equal rows. And I've seen it broken up that way. I've also seen the major arcana with the cards divided in half, and then they're like showing correlations between each of those cards that line up. I've seen people look at it from the version that the Wheel of Fortune is like the turning point, and then from up until the Wheel of Fortune, it's all like the material, the mundane, the human stuff, and then after the turning point of the Wheel of Fortune, it's all talking about like celestial matters, or almost like looking at like a spirituality, like you're looking at the higher tier of self and things like that. So some of those are they're all viable options for looking at the Fool's Journey. They're all valid. The way that I choose to look a little bit more about the Fool's Journey is closer to the Doors theory, which is basically the Fool goes on a journey and he happens to meet each of the characters, and they each teach him something different, or they each represent a lesson that he is learning in his journey, in his life, and things like that. So we start out with the Fool. He is literally the beginning of everything. Whatever he was before this point, yeah, some of it may stick with him, but this is basically a fresh start. His head is held high, he's in high spirits, he's walking off the side of the cliff, about to take this huge plunge, but he's not looking down. He's only got eyes up. He's only looking at his ambitions. The first thing that he meets is the Magician. This is the first step where he learns that he can create something for himself. He can create something new. He can create his own beginnings, his own ideas, his own thoughts. He started with nothing, just himself, and now he's realized that he can create a whole new world for himself out of nothing, or out of just the things that he has on hand. When you look closer, you can see the different elements from the different suits of the cards. He's got all of these different tools, so he's learning that he can create things for himself. He continues on with this new knowledge that he can help himself, he can create for himself. But he realized with that, there needs to be a little bit of balance. He has to start relying a little bit on his intuition. This is where the High Priestess comes in. And she's all about teaching him to not just create something of nothing just for the heck of it, but to use your intuition, to use your gut, to use your inner knowing of what is best, and not just to do it willy-nilly. Do it with purpose, but do it with that inner knowing of what is best for you. With this new knowledge that he can create, and he can use his intuition to know what is best for him, he stumbles upon the Empress. The Empress is this whole idea that from this creation, there's a meaning to it. There's this greater need or this greater meaning in creation. It's his first connection to not only his own self, but, well, I say his own self, but for this purpose, really the fool is genderless. I just say he because, I don't know, it just works. But literally, the fool is genderless in all of this. But the fool learns that he can create, but not only in the mental sense and the idea sense, but he can create something physical. But with that comes a connection to the earth, an idea that there is something more deeper than just himself, but he hasn't quite figured out all about that yet. He just knows that there's more to it. There's something percolating there. Then comes the lesson of the Emperor. The Emperor teaches that with this idea of being fertile, being able to create something meaningful, there needs to be some structure. You can have all the talent of the magician. You can have all the intuition of the high priestess. You can have all the wanting and the yearning and the love of the Empress. But there needs to be some structure. There needs to be some order in order to keep yourself from running wild. With all of this, he has this overwhelming thirst for knowing, for learning. With the Empress and the Emperor, he's found a new balance in the way that he's learning to tread lightly and to work more evenly, not to just do things haphazardly, but with this idea that he's able to do all of these new things in his life and that things are coming together and making sense. There's this overwhelming knowledge to know more, to learn more, to throw himself into the seeking of things. And that's where the Hierophant comes in. The Hierophant is not just a great teacher, but he's a teacher of ideas. He's a teacher of hard knowledge, of thoughts and theory. And he's a willing teacher. But with this seeking of knowledge, he gains the idea that it's not just about him anymore. He is a part of a bigger unit. Maybe a pair, but more also on a human level. It's not just him. He is a part of something bigger, something greater than himself. It's almost where he starts realizing that there's a bigger world outside of just him. And with this, he comes upon the lesson of the Chariot, that now that he knows that there's something out there bigger than himself, he has some knowledge under his wings. He still has that thirst for more, and he's realizing that there's more out there for him. He decides to harness what he does know and chase after it, that he can go after the things that he wants, and that the only thing that's stopping him is himself. The only thing driving him is himself. So with that, he takes the chariot and he rushes forward. Now, I've also heard in this particular part of the journey of the fool's journey, there is a little twist that comes with the chariot. And I actually kind of like this little twist because it helps a little bit from this point forward, because this is when things start getting interesting. He starts rushing forward in his chariot, but something happens, like a wheel comes off. He comes crashing to the ground. He comes to a sudden halt, and he can no longer move forward the way that he was wanting to before. He still has the will to do it. He still has the desire to it, but things have intervened to keep him from moving forward. But with all of this, he has to stop and he has to think about it a little bit. He's really upset about what's happened to him. He wants to keep going, but he feels like someone has kind of hurt him out of turn, like they've done something against him that he didn't quite deserve. But he was forced to stop and think about what's happened and find an inner strength within himself. It's this idea of, even though all the terrible things have happened to him, he still has the ability over himself, over to choose how he wants to react to things, to choose how he's going to deal with things. And with this comes great strength, great inner knowing, and great trusting of himself. His feelings are still really hurt. I mean, he's still, bruised his bottom really good, but he's decided that he's not going to let it stop him. He's going to continue on. So he reaches deep within himself and kind of calms that feeling of hurt, and he decides to move forward. He comes across the hermit. The hermit is a beacon of light, and the fool realizes that he's still hurt. He still feels really indignant about what happened to him, and the fact that, none of this was his fault. He didn't ask for this. He didn't choose for what had happened to him. So he still felt like, even though he decided to move onward, he's still wrestling with all of those feelings, all that negativity, everything that's happened to him and the way that he feels about it. So with the lesson of the hermit comes the idea that it's okay to stop. It's okay to look within yourself and kind of isolate yourself for a little bit, with the idea of dealing with whatever's going on underneath the surface within you. He learns that just because you can find inner strength and you can decide to push past it, it doesn't always solve the problem. And that sometimes you have to take a really good long look at yourself. Just go off by yourself. Take some time and try and, figure out what is really important before you can really move on. And here comes the Wheel of Fortune. This is the turning point of all of it. He realizes that this is the great lesson from which things really start picking up and things kind of take on an interesting light, is because with the Wheel of Fortune is the idea he has this sudden epiphany, this sudden realization that certain things are out of his hand, that some things are just fate, that they're just chance, that just because he wasn't doing anything wrong, that he didn't make a mistake of any kind, that bad things still happened, that he can be perfect, but it's not going to stop things from finding him, just because that's the way that the universe is. So he has to learn this major lesson that there is such a thing as destiny and fate. There is such a thing as just random chance or luck, and that sometimes things are just simply out of his hands. And this forces him to take a really good long look at the justice of it all. Just because something is out of your hands, is it really just? It's not fair that this happened to me, But with the idea of justice and him looking into justice because he's trying to make sense of what happened to him, because he's still upset and hurt about it. With justice, he realizes that there's, again, something bigger than himself. Before, with the idea of the lovers, he learned that it was bigger than himself, but he learned it in the concept of there are other people, not just me. But within the lesson of justice, he realizes, yes, it's not just me, but it's also the realization of, oh crap, these things don't just happen to me, they happen to everybody. This is just how it is. People are at they're at the whim of chance and luck, just the same as me. Everyone has to deal with this. And it forces him to kind of it has him look at his morals and the way that he feels about things. This is the first time that he's really been demanded to choose his own morals and to decide what he views as right and what he views as wrong and how that impacts other people. This brings a period of enlightenment where he, again, is forced to stand still, but he does it with a purpose. He goes still to expand outward, to learn and to kind of connect himself to the greater universe, the greater all, whatever that is. People, higher, things like that. He's finally able to stop and take all these different concepts and start putting them together into something meaningful. So with this great enlightenment, this realization of putting all the pieces together, comes the idea of death. But not just death in a physical sense, but death in the idea that the only thing that never changes is death. Everything else changes. Death comes to mean something completely different to the Fool. Not just the ending of something, but the fact that the transformation, that the only thing constant is death, and the fact that everything is always changing. Nothing can ever stay the way that it was before. Just like any life. It all depends on how you take it, how you meet death. If you fight it every step of the way, or if you let it take you and let it transform the way that it needs to. With this new knowledge of death, this new concept that death is not just the end, that it's something greater, it's something more, something transformative, comes the lesson of temperance. That now you have to kind of take what you have and alchemize it. This might involve some mixing back and forth, trying to find what's really right, what really is perfect for the situation. But with it comes this idea of healing, of greater understanding, greater knowledge, but having to kind of find the balance of it all. Comes the lesson of the devil. That sometimes the things that you want most in life, or the things that feel the best, are not good for you, or they're not healthy. But the devil himself never does anything to force the Fool to do what he wants to do, even at his own expense. He's not the one that tells him to do these things. He's just there watching as the Fool decides that he's learned enough for now. He just wants to enjoy and just do whatever he wants to do. But because he's doing all these things that he wants to do, and he's no longer having that outward look or that top-down view of his own life, he starts losing perspective. He starts getting lost in the good feelings and the good times, and he really does lose perspective on his life and what he wants and where he's going. But the devil really isn't the one doing it. It's all the Fool. It's all how he views things. And it takes him a long time to figure this out. He gets trapped in the mud for a while. Then comes the great tower. There is a struck of lightning that flashes across his vision and illuminates the dark room that he's been in. It illuminates what he's going through with the devil and losing himself. I equate it to a great striking of an idea. Like all of a sudden, there's a great shift in thinking, and everything looks different in a new light. And he realizes that what he was doing wasn't helping him. It wasn't to his benefit. And he decides that he needs to move on, and he needs to finally get over all of these things that happened to him way back with the chariot. And he needs to move on instead of getting bogged down with the idea of the devil and refusing to look at things because they're too scary. And he would just rather focus on the pleasure of things. And with that comes the star. He learns that he's finally at a good point where he can heal. He's finally at a point where he can really finally get past all those past hurts. And he can finally do the things that he needs to do to finally move forward. He continues his journey, finally, with the knowledge of the moon. The fact that just because something starts out a certain way doesn't mean that that's always what it is. And just because he thinks that something is the way that it is doesn't mean that's always true. Sometimes there's a whole different perspective when you change things from night to day and vice versa. He learns that there's new and other things in the shadows that he didn't know about until all of these past experiences had happened. But with that knowledge of all of this is the fact that he learns and realizes that it's not all about the dark. There are wonderful things in the sunlight as well. He finally gets to stop and really look at some of what are the things that's been happening. And with finally being able to move on, he's finally able to reflect in a way that is happy and healing and joyous. He's finally getting a look at all of his past experiences as a child or as a younger fool, and finally being able to truly see the life lessons that he's been learning. And with that comes the great reflection of judgment. Has his life been a happy one? Is he happy with the choices that he's made? Is this really what he wanted? And is he living up to his own potential of what he wanted his life to be or his journey to be? He's finally getting an overall look on if he's reached the end of his road. And with this, he makes the decision, yeah, he made all of these mistakes. Yes, he had all these things happen to him, but the journey was so important and it was so valuable that he would do it all again. And with that understanding and with that thought comes the concept of the world, of completion, of finally reaching where you need to be or where you want to be. It's all about learning all these lessons and finally with the world, the universe comes into alignment and you are finally at the end. But with the end comes a new beginning. Again, the lesson of the death card comes back to the fool and he realizes, I have reached the end of this journey. Time to start a new one. I hope this has been really helpful to you. This is kind of one of the things that I first learned whenever I was looking at the major arcana. The idea of the fool's journey and all the different lessons that he went through and how it started all the way until the end and then how it comes full circle again and he's off on another journey. If y'all have anything else that you would like me to talk about in future videos, or if you have any questions or comments about this particular video with the fool's journey, I would love for y'all to leave a comment. I would love to get feedback. I would love to hear about any comments and questions. But I hope that you really enjoyed this, and I hope you stick around for the next Tarot Tuesday. This is Alara.
And Alex.
And thank you for watching. Bye.
Thanks.